Hello guys, and welcome to the fourth video in this series. Today we'll be looking at collection types in Python. These include tuples, lists, dictionaries, sets, and frozen sets. As you can see, I went ahead and got the screen larger so we can use up more real estate instead of just being at the bottom here. So I think you should have a better view of what I'm doing here. So let's get into it. The tuples and frozen sets are the only immutable built-in collection types in Python. The others being the list, dictionary, sets, these are all mutable. So we explained this earlier in the series where immutable objects, they cannot be changed once they're initialized, and mutable objects are the opposite. So once you have a mutable object, you can go ahead and edit it, and that object, well, any variable that reflect to that object will also change. So in terms of tuple, we initialize a tuple, or normally initialize a tuple, by using the open and close parentheses. For example, t, and let's do a empty tuple. And if we should ask Python what is t, then you should see that it's a tuple. Okay, there's one tricky part when doing a tuple, is that when you have a one item tuple, you have to put a comma at the end of that item. So for example, if I should say item, and I go ahead and ask Python what is s, then you see that it says it's a string, even though we have our open and closing parentheses. So, as I said, if we should go ahead and put a comma at the end of this item and ask Python what type of object is u, then you'll see it's a tuple. So that's all you have to remember, that when you're doing a one item tuple, that you always put your comma at the end. There's another thing with tuple, and that is you don't need to always use parentheses. So for example, I can do this without the parentheses, and if you should check what the object is, then you'll see it's a tuple even without them. If you should, you can do more than one item. So let's say, for example, and once you have more than one items, then you don't need to put a comma at the end. If you do, it won't make a big difference, but it's not required. So if I should go ahead and do that, and you can still check what cars, and you see that it's a tuple. There's a couple functions and methods that you can do with tuple, just like most of the other stuff we went through. You can check the length, and this will tell you how many items are in the tuple. You can also check which items are in certain positions. So for example, you'll go ahead and you say cars, and you want to know what's the first car on the list. then it should tell you it's the Toyota since it's in the first slot. Okay? The next thing you need to know about tuple, again, it's that it's immutable. So, for example, I cannot go ahead and change the first item to say a BMW. As you see, the tuple object does not support item assignment. Okay, so let's create a new list so we can go through more functions with a tuple. So let's add some more cars to this. Okay, that should, yeah, that should be enough. All right, so let's do that. And let's say we want to get the first 3 items in the list. So what we're going to do now is some slicing. And slicing is pretty useful, especially when you have long lists. So let's do some examples. Say, for example, we want, again, the first 3 items. What you do is cars, have your brackets, and you have your colon, and you want the first 3 items, so you just enter 3, and that should give you the first 3. So how this works is that it takes the first item and it goes up. As you remember, this counts 0, 1, 2, 3. So you say we enter a 3 here, why didn't it go to the VW? Well, this 3, it's everything excluding the number here. So if we should put in 2, then you see that it will be 0 and 1. We could also do this, get these 3 items another way, and that's by doing cars and -1. So what this does is that it gets everything except for the last item. So if we should have 10 items on this list, then you will see that we get 9 items coming back if we should use this. If you want to exclude, say, the first item, it will be cars 1, and you see that it exclude it starts from the first one. As I say, this, it starts from this and then it goes up, but not including the item at the end of the colon. So it starts from the first, well, not the first item, but the item in the number 1 spot. And as you remember, it's 0, 1. So it will start from Honda. Okay? So, and then again, you can turn other item into a tuple. So, for example, we have, let's say, a text, and that text equals hello. Right? As you can see, if we ask what type is text, you notice it's a string. But we can take this string and turn it into a tuple. So how we do that? We say tuple and we say text. And we go ahead and do that, and you see that it turned each character into its own tuple. And if we should go ahead and say, well, we didn't assign it to a variable, so yeah, that'll be it for this part. So the next collection type that we'll look into is the popular list. So with the list is mutable. So you can go ahead and change stuff already assigned in a list. It is also an ordered sequence type, similar to the tuple. So however the items are entered, that's how you will always get it back. Okay, so if this is in the 0 position and the 1 position, it will always be in that said position. So for a list, to construct a list, we use a square bracket. So let's do an empty list. And that. So right here we should have an empty list. And again, this type function, which is pretty useful, will tell you that type empty is a list. So let's go ahead and put some items in this list. Let's say let's use back our fruits. So mango, okay, so that is our list. And then with a list, we can do most of the stuff we were doing with the tuple. So for example, slicing. So we can get the first 3 items of the list. There we go. So the same thing that we did with the tuple, you can go ahead and do it with the list. The nice thing about a list though is that we can insert stuff and we can also delete stuff from it. So let's start with inserting. So you have your list of mango, orange, plum and banana, but you want to get some grape on that list. So we'll say, let's use this one. So lst dot, and let's use a pen. So this will basically put whatever you place in here at the end of the list. So for example, we put our grape here and we should call the list item, and then you will see that it adds the grape at the end. And then you say, well, you want to add another item, but you don't want to add this item at the end of the list. We can use the insert function. So dot insert, and this takes 2 parameters. So the first one is the position that you want this item to be entered, and the second is the item itself. So for example, you want to enter this in the 2nd position. So basically this should come after orange, and what you want to enter is, say, pineapple. And if we should call the list object, then you see it actually came after orange right here. We can go ahead and delete stuff from here. So if we no longer like orange, we can say, okay, del, and this is the keyword to delete. You say you don't want orange. Orange is in the first spot, so 0, 1, so it's in the number 1 position. You will say delete, call list, and 1. And if you should call back this, you'll see that orange is gone. So this is a nice thing about a list, is that it's mutable. So you can go ahead and make all your changes from there. There are a couple functions, again, that you can do with the list, similar to what we were doing before. So we won't go through all of them, but say you want to know if mango is in your list, then you could say mango in LST, and you should say true. And there are a lot, so you can go ahead and look at the documentation for Python, or if you have the rapid GUI programming with Python and Qt, it's pretty much listed there, so it's easier to read from that. Okay, so let's go into our other collection type, which is type dictionary. So dictionary, again, is another pretty useful collection type. With this collection type, it's a key and a value. So you have a certain key that is assigned to a certain value. Keys in a dictionary are unique, and they must be immutable. So all the immutable types we went over before, we can use that as a key. Even a tuple can be used as a key. So you have tuple, string, numbers. These can all be used as a key. Okay, so let's look at how we defined a dictionary. You use the curly brackets. And if we should ask Python, hey, what's that? It should tell you that it is a dictionary. Okay, so let's add some items to the dictionary. Let's say equals, and our keys, let's say we're doing IDs. So we're assigning a certain ID to a certain employee. So let's say ID 1. And this is John Brown. Two. Mary Johnson. And let's add a third one. Okay. So that's our dictionary. Okay. So the nice thing about a dictionary, again, is that we can find certain values based on their key. So if we should say, for example, and we want the first one, you see that it's John Brown. So if we want to know who the employee is with a ID of 3, we'll go ahead and we call that object and we put in 3. And you see that it says Brian Brown. So we can also add items to this dictionary. So for example, call the object, and this employee has a ID of 6, and we say equal Jessica Black, and we should call the dictionary object, you see that it adds the ID of 6 with Jessica Black. So that's pretty nice to do. You can also delete, just like how we did with the list. You can go ahead and say, okay, Jessica Black did some bad stuff when she just got employed, so let's take her off the list. So we say delete, we call the dictionary object, and we put the ID number. And if we should call that said dictionary object, we'll see that Jessica Black was removed. So you can pretty much do a lot of stuff from the other collection types. There are a couple new stuff that you can do with a dictionary, like you can get the keys for the dictionary. So let's call the dictionary object and say keys. And you should see that it lists all the keys associated with that dictionary. You can also remove all the items of the dictionary by using dictionary.clear, and that will clear all the items. And if you should call the dictionary object, you get back a empty dictionary. So again, there are a couple more functions and methods that you can do with the dictionary, so it's best if you read up. And the book, again, pretty good, useful resource to have, or you can always go to the Python website. Alright, so let's see what we have next. And then we have the sets. Okay, so for the sets, we would say, well, the set is defined as, well, it's initialized similar to a tuple. The only thing about a set is that you actually tell Python that you're doing a set. So, for example, let's say we have a set of animals. We'll say equal set and empty set. Right? So if we should ask Python what is animals, you see that it's a set. So always remember that you define it by a set, and you have your open and close parentheses. So let's add some animals right here. For example, let's go. And let's go with my favorite. This is a dog. And let's go with cat. Let's go with bird. And let's go with a rabbit. Okay, so that's okay. Let's see what I did wrong here. Oh, I see now. We should have used another set of parentheses. Okay, there we go. And if we should call animals, then you see that we get back a list with all those animals. Okay, so what is the purpose of a list, since it does something similar to what the list does, or what the tuple does, except for the set being mutable. So the nice thing about a set is just like how you did in mathematics, where you can check if, where you can easily check the intersections, what is not in set A, what is in set B. You know, you can do union, stuff like that. So we'll go through it right now. So for example, you have animals and you have owned. So these are the animals that you actually owned. And say for example you own a dog, and you own a cat, right? So you have two different sets. Okay, so what we can do is we can say, all right, so we want to find out what's the difference. So for example, let's use let's use the intersection. So we want to say animals dot intersection, and we want to check owned. So we'll basically check what intersects between animals out there and what you actually owned. And you see that it comes back a cat and a dog. Makes sense, right? So we can actually do a union, but it would pretty much be the same since all the animals in owned is also in the animals. But if we should go ahead and you put union and you put owned, you see that you get back all 4 animals. So you can also do a difference, so you can see what is not. So you say probably you plan to own all the animals out there, so you want to know what you don't own. So for example, difference and owned. So you'll go ahead and you say, oh, you don't have a bird or a rabbit as yet, and then you'll go ahead and get them. So that's the beauty of sets. The frozen set is pretty much the same thing, but again, frozen sets are immutable. So once you create a frozen set, then that's it. You can't go ahead and change what you have in there. So that's pretty much it on collection types. Again, go ahead and play around with them because we went through a lot. So just to make them stick, go ahead and create the different types of collections, so you know which way to initialize it, so you don't mix up using a curly brace when you should have used the parentheses or vice versa. So go ahead and create different types, change items, see which ones are immutable and which ones are mutable. All right. So again, I hope you learned a lot in this tutorial. For the next tutorial, we should be looking at, let's see, we should be doing, control structures. So we are going to be looking at the if statement and so forth. So I will see you guys then. Thanks for watching. Bye.